So now moving on to testing Mode S transponders. From the main menu, I go to the test functions. I'm then doing a transponder, so I select the ATC. Three choices: Mode S, ADS-B, or the ATCRABs. I'm going to select Mode S. Now there are a number of different choices for Mode S. We have a generic Mode S basic test, a generic Mode S full, or generic Mode S select. We also have a Mode S Class A basic, Class A full, Class B basic, and Class B full. So to explain the differences between the basic, the full, and the select. The basic is the quickest version of the test that we can do. It covers everything required of FAR 43 Appendix F, but is a cut down version. The full version does everything. So wherever you see a Mode S full, this is a full Mode S test, and it can take some time to complete. For the select test, that allows you to select particular functions of Mode S. So if you didn't want to run through the whole test, let's say for example you just wanted to test a power value, you could select generic Mode S select and only run the power test. You have the Class A and Class B standards, which are different levels of transponder. So all of the Mode S testing is done the same. So once you know one, it's pretty simple to do the others. Let's start off with the generic Mode S basic test. This takes us to our Mode S screen. The first thing is the warning. You need to be very aware of interrogating and replying on Mode S. The ATC and other local aircraft can be affected by this, so please take all the precautions necessary using shields, informing local ATC, making sure that you comply with the local requirements for testing Mode S. Cancel out of the little warning. Mode S testing is quite simple as long as you get the configuration and the setup correct. So from this Mode S test page, at the bottom you see the config. Let's open up the config. As usual, I can select between a cable or an antenna test. In most instances, it's an antenna test. I'm not going to use any external attenuator. I can leave that as a 0, but if I did, I'd have to put the value of the attenuator in that field. Then you see the Mode S configurations. This is where we can set the address. We can also set the address on the UUT to auto or manual. Most people will use auto. Check cap checks the capability of the Mode S transponder under test. Diversity test if we want to do a single or a dual installation in terms of a top and bottom antennas. In this case, diversity is set to yes. Power limit, I can change the power limits. Most people will operate with the FAR 43 power limit. I can change the power ERP, and I can change it from watts to dBm. Some aircraft specifications are in watts, some are in dBm. You can choose. And most importantly, at the bottom here, we have the antenna. Which antenna we're going to test. In this case, it's set to the top. I need to tell the ARTS system the distances between the ARTS test antenna and the aircraft antennas, both the top and the bottom. So the first thing is the antenna range top. That's the distance from the ARTS test antenna to the aircraft top antenna on the horizontal plane. Next, the antenna range bottom. Exactly the same thing, but the range from the ARTS test antenna to the aircraft bottom antenna, on the horizontal plane that is. Next we have the antenna height top. This is the vertical distance that the aircraft antenna is above the ARTS test antenna. And most of the time the test antenna is on the ground, so this would effectively be the distance from the ground to the top antenna. Next one, antenna height bottom. This is the distance vertically between the ARTS antenna and the aircraft bottom antenna. These are most important. They don't have to be perfectly accurate. Good estimations are good enough. But these values are used to calculate powers in real time. If these aren't set correctly, you can get power measurement failures because the ARTS can't take into account the air gap between the two antennas. It needs to know the losses. At the bottom there, you have the antenna cable length. So because we've stored the losses of the cables that we provide, select what antenna cable you're using, what length it is, and the ARTS will automatically calculate the loss on that cable. First one is for antenna cable, 3 foot, 12 foot, 30 foot or 60 foot. The second one is for the direct cable length, if we're connecting directly. Okay, so exit out of the Mode S config menu. Now our antenna is set up on the tripod. It's pointing at the right antenna that we wish to test. We've put in the distance values vertically and horizontally between the aircraft antenna and the ARTS-7000 test antenna. Once that's done, we hit the start test. The ARTS is now interrogating the aircraft. It's sending an interrogation and receiving a reply. You can check this by looking at the top of the ARTS box. There are light LEDs that identify when the aircraft is being interrogated and when we're receiving a reply from the aircraft. The test will then run. As it's running, this top page gives you some of the very basic information of what is being replied from the aircraft. It will tell you the frequency, the top power, the top minimum trigger level, the tail number, flight ID, the Mode A code, the Mode C altitude, the country, the level of the transponder, the percentage of replies, the bottom ERP, the bottom MTL, the aircraft address, the flight status, the S code, that is the Mode S code, and the Mode S altitude, and whether ADS-B is available through DF17. So this top page gives a good indication of what the transponder is working and the basics are being received. If I go to the list test, this gives much more information about the replies and the characteristics. This is a dummy test, so it doesn't show it, but the ones you have recorded will do. If the test is passed, it'll show green. If it's red, it's been failed. If one is failed, for example, a frequency test, I can look at the specifics of the frequency test. In this case, there's NCDs because this is a dummy test, but that will tell you the ATCRABS frequency and the Mode S frequency. If I go back, let's look at the Mode S characteristic tests. This tells me all the details of the Mode S characteristics. So it's effectively another page of tests hidden in the background. In this case, it gives you all the details of the reply pulses, the side lobe suppression, the reply ratios. If I go back again, I can select the power test. This is telling me the power values for the Mode S and the ATCRABS, the diversity test, all the power values. Again, anything in green is a good test, anything in red is a test failure. So this is the generic basic test. It's the quick and dirty, if you like, to run a very fast Mode S test. The test is still running right now. I'm going to stop the test. Just going to exit back out of this and show you the generic Mode S full. If I select this, I get my same warning about transmitting ATC and receiving ATC interrogations and replies. I'm going to cancel out of that. The configuration is exactly the same as the basic test, so there's no need to go through this again. Same top level test page. Now when I start the test, the aircraft is interrogated and replying. Again, I can see the LEDs on the top panel of the ARTS flashing to show that that's happening. This top level page will fill with data as quickly as possible. If I list the tests, you can see there are more tests now. All the standard characteristic tests, also some of the enhanced surveillance tests as well, the ADS-B functions or the DF values. If the test is running and, for example, DF4 has a failure, it will show red. If I click that, this will show the DF values for DF4 reply, and they include the flight status, the downlink request, the interrogator identity subfield, and various other attributes. So if I go back, let's look at DF17 as a good example. So DF17 is showing us the capability of the transponder and some of the key elements of that transponder, including the position and the altitude. So this is a much more detailed test than the basic generic. This is the basic full. If I go back to the menu, again, anything in red is showing a failure value, and all you need to do is click that and it will take you through the next level of the test result. Anything green is a pass. If I stop this test, exit out again, I'm now going to do the generic Mode S select test. Same warning. At the top there is a test selection button. If I click the test selection button, this brings up a little window with all the different tests in specifically. In my example here, I just want to run a frequency test. So just by clicking each of the modules, I can clear out everything with the exception of the frequency test. When that's done, I hit the Done button. Now the Mode S test, some of the key information will be selected, but only the frequency will be detailed. Some of this page will still fill. Once those results are available, the only thing that it will test is the frequency values. You can select particular parts of the Mode S test and run them individually. Whenever you're running a Mode S, and I'll show it on the generic Mode S, if we collect the generic Mode S, the basic one, if I run my test and anything shows red, if I stop the test and I call up something that has shown red, something that has failed, let's say the frequency test, I can rerun that test very simply just by selecting it through the generic Mode S selective test. Okay, I'm going to exit out of Mode S. The Class A and Class B are different power levels. They work exactly the same as the generic ones, they just have different Class A and Class B power limits, and they're all compliant to the FAR 43 Appendix F specification. So when my Mode S tests are complete, I hit back to my ATC menu, hit back again, back to the main functions menu.